Hi, Deborah Lee again, back with my I am always with you, Psalm 73:23. Not videoing me today, just um, until I can work out the lighting, which I shared, the overhead lighting. Um, I did Google about all that, and overhead lighting is the worst thing to have on your face. It shadows your face, it makes you look pretty bad, and that's what I was not happy with my last videos. And even my hairdresser, I showed her the 3-minute video. She goes, Deborah, that doesn't even look like you. So yeah, it was pretty. It wasn't good for me because I've had a hellish sort of life, and I'm living a much better life now. I'm becoming out of the pit and into the palace, as they say. I've been coming out of the pit and into the palace. So seeing myself looking like that, I was like, oh dear. But anyway, I will work that out somehow with God. So we're up to page 62 of Places by Debbie Lee. And it's Deborah who's reading it now. Deborah. So, every morning, Rose would get up early to start her day. She would walk around the bush even as the sun was rising, looking for her little friend, her much-loved dog, calling, Amber, Amber. She never found her and blamed it all on David because of his lack of love for animals. He refused to even pick up their poop, as the smell of animals pooping made him gag. Rose felt he was extremely selfish and full of pride, just like his stuck-up religious parents. Oh dear. He may have been handsome, but he was just so fussy, so clean and so perfect, that it was all too much for her at times. And so she was beginning to build a wall between herself and her husband. Desperate for companionship of her lost beloved friend, Rose started demanding another puppy. Her continual demand led David to believe that if he bought another Australian Terrier, it would make her happy. She named the puppy Bambi. The small dog was just so cute, with a little black, wet button nose and little dancing legs. So life continued, but since David dry reached every time the puppy pooped or vomited, he was resentful and would say, foul animals, foul animals. They expect us to pick up and clean up after them. Yuck. Hun, I don't know how you do it. Rose would answer, because animals are not cruel like humans, that's why. Living on the estate was a real nightmare and torment for Rose, the children, and for Bambi, as there was no peace. Her birds squawked but didn't sing. Her babies cried but didn't sleep, and her puppy barked constantly. The estate was so noisy all day because of the men with their earth-moving equipments, chainsaws, hammers, foul language, yelling and fighting. There was so much noise as so many houses and shops were being built. And to make matters worse, a primary school was taking shape right opposite their home. The trees on the estate were mature red river gums, and Rose felt she could hear them crying as they were being ripped out of the earth. The entire ruckus was going on all day and every day. Adding to that, there were dirty nappies, feeding, cleaning, cooking, washing, ironing, being done alone with the children. She felt heavily burdened, overwhelmed and trapped. She feared her nerves would break one day soon and she would have a fit, a breakdown. Rose was spiralling into darkness and depression. If only they had built in an established part of the city. There was no emotional support from David, who would just come home, a kiss at night, a kiss and the girls before a kiss for the girls before following his usual routine, except that his branding was getting made stronger and stronger each time. He would then fall asleep in his chair, and it was often after midnight. Before midnight, he would finally come to bed, and so this vicious circle continued. Life was hard for Rose, and at the next couple of years went by, she felt it was time for a break. Since the primary school across the road was on hold due to insufficient people living on the estate, she found another one that was only a short bus trip away. She would put Debbie on the bus at 8:30 a.m. and so have just one child for 6 hours. Even though 6 hours of school were too much for a little 4-year-old. Having spent most of her short life with her grandmother, Debbie had always been mature beyond her years. As a result, the child would stand up to anyone who didn't treat her right, letting them know what was right and what was wrong. Debbie had the attitude of a 50-something-year-old woman. And that's me. With Debbie at school, the young mother was more at peace, as she felt her firstborn was very bold, truth-speaking character was a bit too much. The words were okay coming from Iris, but not from a 2-foot pipsqueak child. Rose didn't really like Debbie very much. She felt more of a mother to Heather, and also had a great love for her dog. Debbie would often look at the little terrier, wishing her mum would love her like she loved Bambi and other animals. So I've just come to chapter 5. Debbie at 4 years old. So here we go. Debbie at 4 years old. She's only a little one. So let's go. Debbie. My first bus trip on my own was at 4 years of age. I remember the steps up into the bus. My legs weren't long enough, so I bent over and pulled myself up, getting my hands dirty as I climbed. The bus driver responded impatiently, saying, "Hurry up, kid. You're making us late. Faster next time, girlie. You may be pretty, but this life ain't for pretty little girls. So toughen up and hurry up." Oh dear, humans. I didn't have to pay a fare as children travelled free on public transport in the 60s. I think they still get free transport now, really. I hurried to find a place to sit, but the bus started moving and my little body bounced from side to side. I couldn't get onto a seat as it was just too high for me. The same as the steps of that bus. In the 60s, the bus steps were so high. I still remember them sitting here today, how high they were. So anyway, I hung on to the metal bar that went around the seats. My hands became wet with nervous sweat, and I kept falling. My little bag in one hand and trying to hang on with another. My stomach felt like it had tight knots in it, because I had been taught to be so proper, so perfect. But there I was, falling on the dirty floor of the bus with my dress coming up and showing my underpants. I was so upset that tears were running down my cheeks. My hands, my legs, my underpants and my dress were all covered in the dirt from other people's shoes. And see, that was a bush estate with everything being dug up. So people would get on the bus with dirt all over their shoes. And there I was, falling in it. Soon the bus driver called Studfield Primary School. It was my stop and time for me to get off. I'm telling you now, going down those steps was like climbing down a cliff of large rocks, and my little legs didn't quite make it. The bus driver didn't really stop the bus properly, and as I fell off each level and onto the gravel, everyone was laughing at me, along with the bus driver, who yelled, "Little Miss Pretty's all dirty and crying, tut tut." I was so little, so courageous, and so precious. That was the beginning of the people trying to break my loving, happy, joyful spirit. Sad, hey, what adults do to children, how adults and humans laugh at people when they're having a hard time instead of someone coming and helping me. Anyway, one Monday morning I was running a little late as Mummy had woken up crying. So I was trying to console her. She cried a lot. I made the bus on time but had forgotten to use the bathroom before I left home. All the way on the bus I was wetting my pants, and by the time I got to school and ran to the girls' toilet, it was all down my legs, on my socks, all soggy. On my socks and in my shoes were all soggy. I stood there crying as I didn't know what I should do. I started to wipe my legs with some toilet paper and remembered thinking to myself, I must take these underpants off and hide them. Coming out of the toilet, I saw a room that was locked. And remember, I was only 4. So I threw them under the door, relieved to have found an answer to my problem. I hurried to my class as I was late. I felt most uncomfortable thinking that everyone could see through my uniform and know I had no underpants on. I sat at my desk, conscious of my soggy wet socks and shoes and my nakedness underneath. It was a shameful place to be. It's amazing because there was another wound for me and another door open to shame. And as I go through reading this book and then teaching on deliverance and things that we carry into our adult life. So that was a day where shame came on me really, really, like a spirit of shame came on me that day. Anyway, later that day I went back to the toilets to see if I'd hidden the evidence well and saw a sign on the door under which I'd thrown the wet pants. 2 days later, our teacher stood in front of the class and announced, "These little underpants size 4 were thrown under the staff toilet door. I've washed them and would appreciate it if their owner would come forward and claim them, as your parents will be wondering why you came home without your underwear." I never admitted to them being mine, as the whole class would have laughed and poked fun at me. I felt the teacher was wrong to embarrass someone in such a way. It was obvious to me that if somebody, and I was only 4, if somebody had wet their pants and thrown them under a door, they wouldn't want the whole school to know. You would think a teacher, with all her intellect and knowledge, would have known what effect it would have had on a small child in front of a class of 4 to 6-year-olds. I did think to myself, why do adults hurt children so much? And, I had that thought because of the way my mother treated me. So, yeah. Why can't they remember how hard it all is and how small we are, and think about how we feel as we're growing up? My mother did not. My mother did notice my pants were missing, so when she asked where they were, I lied and said, "I don't know, Mummy." I didn't want to tell her the truth, as she got upset over the smallest things. To her, a pair of missing pants would mean I was up to something, but I wasn't. I had just been more concerned for her that morning, more concerned for her and my little sister that day than for my own physical needs of going to the toilet. And a 4-year-old, needs to be reminded, clean your teeth, if you've been to the toilet, you got your lunchbox, I was 4 and I was consoling my mother that morning. So, yeah. Well, then, yet another school morning. I got up, washed my face with my face washer, went to the toilet, ate some Vegemite toast, brushed my teeth, put my dress on and set off for the bus stop. Goodbye, Mummy. Bye, Heather. See you this afternoon. It was a good day as I learnt about Australia, the country I was born in, and how it had 7 states, counting Tasmania. After school, I was skipping to the bus on my little 4-year-old legs when an older boy came up to me smiling. "Hi," he greeted. "I heard your name's Debbie. Would you like to have some fun?" "Oh," I answered eagerly, as he was so friendly. "Yes, please. I like fun. Come on then. Come over the road to the park and sit on the swing and I'll push you." I thought about it. A bit. They were big swings, and I didn't want to miss my bus. But I shrugged off that thought and decided some fun would be great. I ran towards him, asking the boy, "What's your name?" He replied, "My name is Steve. Hang on." "Hang on," he said. "I'm twisting you up as high as the chain will go." He then started laughing with a real mean look on his face and a nasty tone in his voice. "Little Miss Perfect, see if you like this horror ride," he gloated. The chains went around and around, crunching and crunching, as if they were about to break. I was going higher and higher, and I couldn't speak as fear had robbed me of my breath. I thought, this Steve boy is going to kill me. "I hope you make it, pretty," he called as he ran off. Oh, and back then the chains were so big and so long. They were not like they are now. They weren't very children friendly. "I hope you make it, pretty," he called again as he ran off. The swing started unravelling, slowly at first. I could hear every link grinding, bit by bit, around and around. Then it sped up, round and around and around. I started crying. I couldn't breathe, as my small body inside and out was trembling and tensing. My sweating hands were slipping as I tried to hang on. My head was almost hitting the bars on the other side, both sides of the swing. I was too young and too small for the swing, which had been built for at least a 10-year-old. I didn't even take up half the room on the seat. I hung on as it unwound and then went from side to side. As soon as I could, I jumped into the sand face first, getting sand on my now snotty, teary red face, and I was full of fear. And this is again, like fear came in here as well. And I ran back across the road only to find I had missed my bus. Oh dear. I stood there looking at all the bush around me, knowing that because of my wrong choice, I had to find my own way home. As I had been travelling on the bus for some time, by that stage, I remembered the way. I also knew I would have to start walking as Mummy didn't have a car, so she wouldn't be coming for me. The trek home was full of tears and fear, knowing my mother would be very angry. Those roads seemed like major highways to my small legs. I was also worried about snakes and other wildlife as I marched like a little soldier through the torn down bush estate. And see, that trip, probably like for an adult, was probably, I don't know, say wouldn't have even probably been 1 mile or 1 kilometre. It wasn't far away, but for a 4-year-old, it was extremely far away. Anyway, I found my way to the front door, terrified, snotty-nosed, dirty, and still trembling in much fear. When my mother saw me, I looked into her eyes, hoping for compassion, love, and mercy, but saw none. So I knew I was going to be hit. Not held, not kissed, not comforted, not cuddled. I didn't understand why she always reacted badly to mistakes. I got one hell of a beating. Mummy bashed me so hard, pulled my hair, and some of the hair came out of my head. "Debbie, go and run a bath for you and your sister," she screamed. and I don't want to hear your story about being late. You won't be eating at the dinner table tonight. You'll be having boiled eggs in your room. I don't want to see your face. And right there, more trauma, more lack of love, no hugs, no compassion, just bashed. I ran the bath and washed Heather, dried her and myself, and put our nighties and slippers on. I felt so cold and my body was hurting inside and out. My tiny feet were covered in blisters, and Mummy had made my head and arms bleed from digging her long fingernails into me. I climbed into bed, ready for my yummy dippy eggs with soldier toast. It was the best thing after that horrible day. Mummy came in, put my dinner on my dressing table, and without one word of comfort left the room. I thank God for the chicken that laid the eggs for me, as that was a nice thing to think about. Happy, clucking chickens, and not my mummy's big, angry face and violence to my body. I also imagine myself being the little soldier as I dipped each thin slice into the orange slushy centre of my eggs, as that was how I'd felt that afternoon. As I'd made my way through the bush, it's amazing, my mother could have said, "What a brave little girl, you were able to walk home. What a brave little girl," but no, I was not told I was a brave little girl. She didn't even want to hear my story. That's what my mother was like. I was not allowed to tell my stories, and I think that's why God is giving me this blessing now to be able to tell my story, to be able to speak. Because a lot of people don't listen to your stories, or they don't really care, but God does. That's why God's got me sharing my story. So I'd felt that afternoon as I made my way through the bush. I finished my meal and put the tray outside my door, and then I ran and cleaned my teeth before hopping into bed and falling asleep. So I wonder if I should finish there. I'll read a bit more. Heather and I shared a room with a large double window which spoke only one thing to me, and that was escape. Escape. I'd look out into the bushes, and in my heart I would plead, "God, get me out of this place. It's amazing. I used to speak to God, yet we had no nothing really. Although yes, my dad used to say grace, and he used to thank God for our dinner. So I used to speak to God. I would plead, God, get me out of this place. And this is a 4-year-old. I don't understand why my mother doesn't love me, and I don't want to be here. It's very sad. The next day, I got to school. There was a big truck out the front, and during the morning announcement, the headmaster told us that the quadrangle area was being asphalted for a basketball area and that we must keep away. By lunchtime, that stuff had been laid, and Steve came over to me. Steve, the boy that put me on the swing. So how you feeling, pretty? He snared. I hated that boy more than anything. So I said, what do you want, ugly? 4-year-old. I dare you take your shoes off and see how warm and soft the asphalt is on your feet, he taunted. I wanted to show him I was tough. So I took off my shoes and socks and accepted the dare. Even as I remembered Mummy frequently spoken words, I wish you were a boy. Yeah, my mother wanted me to be a boy. Oh dear. I felt I disappointed her by being a very beautiful baby girl. I started walking on that stuff. Steve said, "Ha! You fell for it, stupid. Your feet are going to burn from the inside out. The tar has a way of burning and melting the inside of your feet up to your knees. By the time you get home, you'll have no feet," he said. He then stole both my socks and shoes and ran off with them. I ran and ran to catch him, but my feet were burning. When I went back into the class, no one noticed I was barefoot. As soon as the school bell rang, I went looking for my socks and shoes, but couldn't find them. My brain was so young, I never thought forward, only what was at hand, because, that's what 4-year-olds do. They only think about what's at hand. And finding them was very important to me, to find my shoes and socks. Then I realised I'd missed the bus again. Oh, I thought I would die, as Mummy would surely kill me for being so stupid. As I sat there crying again, I saw my little black shoes thrown near the swing. I hated that boy. And in my heart, I wanted to hurt him really bad, like he had hurt me twice. Now, what was I to do? I didn't want to go home, but I had nowhere else to go. I thought maybe I could walk to Nanny's, but I couldn't remember the way to her house. It was so far away in Oakley. I thought she would hold me and kiss me and tell me I was beautiful, that she loved me. And she'd always say, "You're my favourite grandchild, Debbie." My feet felt like they were on fire, and my mind was filled with fear that I might lose them. I walked home much slower than I had the day before, fearful of my mother's reaction once I got home. As I limped through Wantirna, our suburb in the bush, I thought back to the first terrifying beating I'd received from her, my mother. I had been sitting in a high chair, being fed by Jennifer, my cousin, my Aunt Beverly's daughter. She had looked at me and said, "I'll get some food, baby Debbie." She had then gone out to the backyard with the bowl and come back in with one of Bambi's poos, which she had started feeding to me. As I was only young, I hadn't known I was eating dog poo. However, I remember the horror I had felt as my mother, with angry bloodshot eyes, had dragged me out of my high chair by pulling my hair, pulling the roots out from my young scalp, and racing me into the bathroom, slapping my face, screaming and scratching and pinching my arms and my legs deeply with her long fingernails, cutting into my skin, drawing blood. She had kept yelling, "You stupid, idiotic, dumb child." She had seemed to think I had known what I was doing, but eating dog poo hadn't been my plan. When I arrived home that day, I would have to go inside. If I hid in the bushes, they would come and find me, and I would be belted anyway. I didn't want to make another mistake, so I bravely knocked on the flywire door. My little knuckles were red and swollen, as my body was already stressed, and I knew I was about to face more stress. Seeing my mother's red eyes, the rage and anger on her face, and her hands clenched as if to murder, I knew it was going to be really bad. "Where have you been, you naughty bad girl?" she shrieked. I tried to tell her my story, but the beating started even as she dragged me into my room by my hair. Once again, I felt the roots being pulled out of my scalp. The kicking, the punching, the clawing, the pinching. She used to pinch me as well and turn my skin. She grabbed my arm and twisted it around and around until it was burning. I started crying for help. "Mummy, Mummy, Mummy, stop. Mummy, 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 stop hurting me." "Hurting you?" She spat and again started hitting my face and head, clawing at me like some wild animal. My head felt swollen. I yelled again, "Stop, you're hurting me." But I was too small to stop her. Mummy yelled, "Shut up, you ugly child. You're so ugly, so ugly. Look at yourself in the mirror. You are ugly." I looked at myself, all of 4 years of age, as the tears snot and red, frightened eyes. My face was swollen to double its size from the bashing, and blood oozed from the broken skin on my arm, hands, and face. And yes, that was the day I saw ugly. That was the day I saw ugly. I felt it, I looked it, and I accepted it. That was the day I said, "I'm ugly. That's why my mother hates me. To be bashed like this, I must be ugly." So that was something else that came on me, another major wound of feeling very ugly. My sister Heather came into the room saying, "You're ugly, Debbie. Mummy says you're bad and very naughty. You make Mummy very sad and you make Mummy very mad. It's all your fault, Debbie." Then, following the same routine, bath Heather and myself, dress Heather and myself in our 90s, then bed for me. The bad person, eggs in bed, no communication, no hugs, no love, no cuddles, just silence and darkness. And then after a while, I broke through it and asked, "Why do you think I'm ugly?" Just trying to think. Yes, I might finish there. That's where I asked her, "Why do you think I'm ugly?" So, being a little girl, having a mother that tells you you're ugly is so traumatic. And that's why I'm called to help an advocate for children and called to help children and parents to not do this to their children because I had to go through such a hellish life to finally, be the woman I am today. So I'm going to finish there. It's very sad, and next week we'll see what my mother's response is to my question, "Why do you think I'm ugly?" So, next week I might be back with lighting. We'll see. So praise God. What page are we up to? I'll just better say that. Page 70. So that's great. Page 70. So it was a bit longer, the one today. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed writing the book. Because the book, I got so much healing writing that book, writing my story, but writing it with Jesus and the Holy Spirit. It's been a healing for me. So God bless. God says, I am always with you. I am always with you, Deborah, and I'm always with you to the listeners that are listening. Psalm 73:23. He's always with you. Okay, God bless. Love to you all. Bye until next week.